Yes, welcome everybody to the meeting, first meeting of the Health and Safety Committee of the Cincinnati Board of Education for 2021. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Armin Messer.
Great. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Messer. And we will take the roll. Ms. Davis, can you take roll for us, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sure. Ms. Bates?
Present.
Ms. Bowers?
Present.
Mr. Messer?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And the first order of business is to elect the committee chair for the year. So as former chair, I will officiate until the new chair is elected. So I will accept nominations from the floor. Ms. Bowers?
I nominate Melanie Bates to remain chair of Health and Safety Committee.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. That. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And thank you very much for the vote.
Guilty as charged. Perfect. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
This is going to be a very uplifting meeting. First of all, I want to say that the main reason why we are virtual is because of audio, because we will have media at this meeting. We're going to have agenda items that are very, very informative and some very, very exciting news that has already been given to our staff members, and that is that our vaccinations are going to start being administered this week. So what you have in your hands as the second agenda item is our committee work. And what I would like to do is ask the committee members to take a look at that and then come back next month with your recommendation. Would that work for you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I do want to advise you on one item that I'm going to advocate being added. I spoke with Ms. Bolton, and the Finance Committee meetings are very, very lengthy. And part of that is because of the reporting of the legislative liaisons, Mr. Kearney and Mr. Glover. And since this year, a lot of the legislation is going to be around health and safety, it was suggested by Ms. Bolton, and I agree that we ask the board for a change in the bylaws to move legislative reporting to health and safety for this year. So we will present it to the full board at our next full board meeting on February the 8th. So the board can consider that, but I wanted to give this committee a heads up so you could think about that as well. So the next on the agenda, let's see, are Dr. Amin and Dr. Khan here yet? I heard that they were not going to be able to be here until 4:30.
I do not see him as of yet on the attendees.
Okay, so we can wait until they come because we have the Safe School Water Report by Sarah Trimble Oliver. And this was an agenda item that was brought to the full board for assignment to this committee. It was brought to my attention by, I believe it was a staff person, that the National Sierra Club had concerns about buildings being dormant and the quality of water, and that water may need to be tested before that it could be consumed and used by students and staff. So we asked Ms. Trimble Oliver to take a look at that for us.
Yes, so we have recently received lots of guidance from the Ohio Department of Health about making sure that buildings that were not being used or were only being partially used, that the water would still be safe when the buildings reopen. And so we have invited Robin Brandon to give a brief report out on that. We have also additionally emailed a memo to you just a few moments ago, also explaining what has been going on in our buildings. And so if we have Robin, I will turn it over to her.
Yeah, hello. Thank you. So yes, included in your memo, there were 2 items that I touched on, and you can read those at your leisure, but specifically related to your question on the information that we received from the Ohio EPA and the Ohio Health Department. So keep in mind that these are related to buildings that are vacant or have a significant decrease in use. And although our teaching staff and our students weren't in the buildings in the spring, facilities staff and student dining services staff were in the buildings. So at no time did we cease water usage in our buildings. In addition to that, in early April, when our plumbing staff came back, they did our standard procedural flush out in all of our buildings. So what that looks like is they start at the farthest point from the water main entering the building. They turn on the sinks, and they run that water consistently for 15 to 60 minutes. So they work their way from the farthest point to the point closest to where the water main comes into the building. They let the water run, and they turn it off. After that, they go and they flush all the toilets to make sure that they are working properly. So that procedure happened in April. This is something we do routinely in our seasonal buildings and our football stadiums and concession buildings. So it's a procedure we're very familiar with. The other thing that was noted in the information from the EPA was buildings that have closed water loops or recycled water systems are of concern. We do not have those in any of our buildings. So we have an open system, no closed loop systems. So in summary, we've been following all of the applicable recent recommendations for unoccupied or partially occupied buildings that came from the Ohio Department of Health. The other thing, and we can discuss this at a later date, but I did include in the brief was the information related to the work that our Office of Environmental Health and Safety has done related to lead content in our water. And I can share with you just briefly that a lot of work was done over since 2016. Waterworks did not identify any of our buildings of being of concern, but we went ahead and did sampling at all of our buildings, about 5,000 samples, and found less than 1% of any of our buildings had any sinks or faucets that contain lead. At those locations, we replaced that equipment. So we are happy to report that we feel that all of our buildings are safe.
Thank you. Ms. Bowers?
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Ms. Brandon. Can you all hear me? Okay. Just to clarify, the water that you are testing, is that different from our drinking systems? Because I heard you talk about running water in the sink, or flushing water in the toilet. But weren't we in the process of putting all the new water systems in our schools? And is that different from this kind of item on the agenda?
No, so the potable water in the building is tied to the sinks. A lot of our classrooms have bubblers attached to the faucets. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the water that we're flushing. Yeah, okay. And we call it a building flush because what we do is we open up the faucets and just let the water run freely for 15 to 60 minutes.
Okay. Good news.
Mr. Messer, do you have a question?
No, I appreciate the efforts to make sure that our drinking water is safe as we're working towards entering the buildings again, and a couple of mine going in there. So this gives me peace of mind on things you don't necessarily think about, but I appreciate the question being asked and then the follow-up from the administration.
Okay. I have a question on, well, relative to the reopening of buildings, but a little different subject. And we had discussed this before, but I wanted to ask it again about the improvements to the air filtration systems in the schools, because that I know has been a question with parents. Can you discuss what's been done with the air filtration systems and the improvements there?
Sure. Our HVAC team, as well as our local building engineers and engineering professionals and commissioning agents, have all been working really hard on improvements to our HVAC systems. So we have upgraded our filters to a MERV 10, which is the highest level filter that we can use without causing static pressure issues in our systems. We've increased the number of filter changes. We do a 2-hour flush out, another flush out, but this is air, every morning. So what we do is we open up the dampers and allow 100% outside air to come through the building, and then it blows right back out. It's exhausted out, and we do that for 2 hours every morning. We're also looking at some other ionization best practices that we're studying right now, and may implement those as well.
Are there any other questions about building quality for the reopening of the schools?
No, thank you.
It looks like we're in great shape. You guys have been hard. So I'm going to jump to other business because we had a new agenda item come up today, and hopefully the other committee members will join me in this announcement and information, and that is the updated vaccination schedule. And we have both Susan Bunte and Laura Mitchell with us, and if one of you can give information regarding that, the really good news that was received today by the district. So Laura and Susan, you're on.
So I'll start and just give some opening statements that we are in the process of communicating with our staff about the vaccination plan. Susan has done a ton of work on this plan, and so she'll be sharing some highlights for you about the plan. What we're very careful and sensitive to not do is to get ahead of the work that we're doing with our staff. And so we'll make our comments thorough but limited so that we can make sure that we have dotted our I's and crossed our T's before we release anything that is completely official. But there is very good news as it relates to our vaccination plan. In addition to, it's my understanding that potentially the governor will be making an announcement about it tomorrow. So Susan, please.
Yes, hi everyone. Good afternoon. So our staff members just received an email a little while ago informing them about our phased vaccination program. So as you may know, we are going to have vaccinations this week for about 2,000 of our employees. So our Cincinnati Health Department will be providing those, and beginning on Thursday at Mount Airy from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., as well as Friday at Mount Airy from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., and on Saturday at our Duke Energy Center from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So we recognize that we are doing our vaccination in waves. So in that first group, we have matched the participants to our phased entry return to school plan. So our employees who will be vaccinated among that first group will include our preschool teachers, our early learning teachers, those and paras, and those folks who are working closely with our specialized classrooms, in addition to our building engineers and custodians, among others. So our staff will be given a link tomorrow from our Cincinnati Health Department that will go through our Human Resources Department so they can sign up for individual appointment time. And then we will follow a similar schedule for in our Group C. And then 3 weeks later, because we're taking the Pfizer vaccine, we'll begin the second dose in that 21-day time after. So I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have or provide any additional information.
Ms. Bowers.
Yes, thank you. Assistant Superintendent Bonte, I got that right. I am excited about this option even being available to us and all the hard work that you and the leadership team has done with getting this even off the ground in collaboration with the governor. One question I do have, I want to make sure I'm clear when you say those people are there in phase-in. Does that include senior support people, administration, those people that are in the building regularly? So it includes all of those, our food service people? Okay, very good. And those
Yes,
people that are working? Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
in that Group B, they're going by full school. So it'll be anyone who works in an elementary school, anyone who works in a high school.
Okay, good to hear. And I'm delighted that we have the Pfizer 3-week turnaround versus the Moderna. So that's very good.
So Susan, Mom, would you please talk a little bit about the work that you have as it relates to the manual that you've created? You're going to walk through the sites on Saturday. And so I believe that we are among the first to get the vaccine because we are a district who's ready in terms of the logistics, and we have partnerships with healthcare professionals who can really help us with it. And so, Susan, I think it would be great if you just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So, Rob, if you don't mind sharing the screen, and then we can just highlight some of the pages in our vaccination plan guide too, if that is possible. We had a really nice opportunity on Saturday to spend time with our partners from Cincinnati Health Department, as well as some of our partners from Children's Hospital, to be able to walk through the site at College Hill where they were actually administering the vaccine. And during that time, we were able to ask many, many questions, as well as to figure out ways in which we could support our employees through this process. So we're going to go to the next slide, please, and we'll just do a very high-level overview of what this looks like. So we broke it into several different categories, including how we're supporting our employees, what the sites look like, the general flow of the process, and needs and notes and budget. On the next slide. And on the next slide. So this is the information that we already discussed about where the actual vaccination clinics are being held. You may hear the word pod used as we move through this process. That stands for a point of distribution. So the Cincinnati Health Department refers to these vaccination sites as pods. And we also have employed our hotline staff to answer any questions for our employees who may be having a challenge or a question, so that they are able to provide actual link access to folks and be able to help them register. On the next slide, you can see further delineated Group A, Group B, and Group C. So we recognize that some employees may not be able to participate in that first grouping. So we have on-call groups ready to be able to move in the available slot. Next slide. So this is just very high level plan of what is occurring in terms of staff notification, which is in progress as we speak. And on the next slide is a high level overview of how our employee hotline group will participate in supporting our staff. On the next slide. And on one more, you can see that we have thought through what our Cincinnati Health Department will be supplying to our sites, and including signage and materials and the staffing that they'll be providing. Next slide, please. And CPS at the Mount Airy site will also be providing additional staffing to make sure that things flow smooth. Slide, please. So during the actual vaccination pod or vaccination clinic, our staff will flow through a variety of stations during their vaccination process. So they get their temperatures checked, then they actually register and check in, then they move into a vaccination line where they wait until they're actually ready for the big event. Afterwards, our staff members will be asked to wait for 15 minutes in a monitoring area so that the medical professionals can make sure that they are not having any reactions, and then there is an exit out a different door. And so, Rob, you can just move very quickly through these next slides. I'm not even going to address them specifically, but you can see all of the items in red are actions that Cincinnati Public Schools is taking in terms of what we need to do. And that concludes, there are many, many, many more pages in this document, but that provides you with the basic information. So thank you, Rob, for being able to share that with us.
Susan, will you talk a little bit about the survey that we conducted in terms of the number of employees who are interested in getting the vaccine?
So last week, Krista Boyle and her team put out a survey that just asked folks very simple questions about, were they interested in receiving more information about, first of all, were they interested in having the vaccine? If it was a yes, then they moved to a different set of questions. If it was a no, then it became, do you want more information? So we had close to 4,000 people take the survey. 600 people said no thank you, and then 400 people said they needed more information. All the rest were yeses. So many, many, many people within our district are very excited about the opportunity to take the survey. We already know that we've received hundreds of calls to our hotline this afternoon as soon as the email came out. So there has been a lot of enthusiasm, and as there should be, about this opportunity. For the employees who expressed interest in having more information, there will be a town hall tomorrow evening with Dr. Odell Owens, who will be answering questions for our employees about any concerns that they may have about the vaccination.
Ms. Bowers.
Yes, can you tell me that number that you said who took the survey, Susan?
Yes, and I think Krista's on this call as well, so I don't want to misquote, but I think it was close to 4,000 employees who actually answered the survey. Yes, ma'am, and it could even be higher today.
Okay, and so about 600 said no thank you, but significantly the 400 had more questions, which could be answered tomorrow.
Yes.
With Dr. Owens.
Yes.
Okay, so that's huge, and which says that we have enough vaccine for all of our staff, right? Or
yes, so the Cincinnati
we're prepared for that.
Yes, the Cincinnati Health Department has assured us that they will get the vaccine that we need for our employees. Yes.
Very good, very good.
Would you talk about what you saw Saturday? Because the system that they have developed is pretty flawless. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so we had the opportunity to visit the the Recreation Center in College Hill, I apologize, and really watch how the health department had established a vaccination pod for those who were 85 and above. And so they've been learning. So at this point, they've already vaccinated the police department across our city, the fire department across our city, multiple groups. And so during this time, they have really been able to hone the process. They actually physically time the different segments of the process so that people are able to move quickly, and they've done improvement processes along the way. So when an employee enters through the front doors, they're greeted by someone, and then their temperature is checked. They then move to a registration table where they are checked in. Once they're checked in, they then go into that vaccination line. At the registration table, it's constantly being monitored. So they have a list of everyone who's registered for that day, everyone who has shown up, and then they start making phone calls for people who are more than an hour late so that they can either pull those people in or move to a backup list so that every single vaccine is given, because we don't want to waste any of the vaccinations. Once people are in the vaccination line, there were nurses who were pulling the vaccine out of the vials so that then they handed the syringes to someone else to make sure they're maximizing the amount of dosages in each of the vials. The shot is actually given, and then they move to a monitoring area. So it was very, very smooth, and they were able that day to move 500 people through the process.
Melanie? Yes, wasn't sure if I was on your screen or not. One of my favorite quotes is, thorough preparation makes its own luck. Or, as I often say, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I think this is all great news, but I think you kind of touched on it earlier. This would never have happened without our superintendent earning the respect of our governor and being able to have an open door. So I think that needs to be stated with an exclamation point. And then it wouldn't have been done if we couldn't have said, and here's our plan, here's our need. And, and I think that, as we've gone through this decision, which has not been easy for any of us, and I think I can speak for my board members and my staff members, all of us sitting here, and I would say just one of the things as I'm looking through the personal emails, we've gotten a lot of these from a lot of my friends who are staff are saying, just let us get that first dose. And, and I think questions I had was, are we going to be able to match it with the waves? Of course you've done that. So, my child's Lillian's preschool teacher, Olivier's kindergarten teacher, their parents, their lunchroom people, their custodian, everybody's going to have that first dose. And so, it's kind of the going back to the original work, none of that would have been possible without the work behind the scenes. That I think we had an inkling of the things that you're working on, but nice to see that come to fruition, maybe a little bit later than we had planned, just in getting all the planes to land. But, my phone blew up this afternoon, by friends in our buildings who were saying, have you heard? Have you heard? Oh my gosh, we're on a call. And one building, their whole staff was on, and it was cheers and things like that. So I just want to thank Laura for establishing the respect of our governor, and the entire team for putting in the work so that we could actually bring it to fruition. And I know that she always champions her team, and we know what a great job they do to make sure that she's got what she needs to go fight for this district. So thank you all.
If I could say thank you, Board Member Messer. I will say and just highlight the work of the team. The first question that was asked by the governor is, are you ready? Do you have a plan? And so our team really did the work. Susan Bunting really did the work, and all the parties who came to the table. So what I did was minor in comparison to the work of the team. So thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions. Actually, I received them from President Sellers, and I'm sure that this is accounted for. It's just not enumerated on the list. But one is that when will the auxiliary teachers receive theirs, because they're already in person, and are they able to get vaccines with the first group?
So they follow the wave. So they won't be in group A, but they'll be in group B. They follow, if they're an elementary school teacher, they go with the elementary staff. If they're a high school teacher, they go with the high school. Yeah.
Okay, what about the PAM, the PAM teachers, because they work with the kindergarten students on through. When will they be vaccinated?
So they, again, anyone who works in elementary building, with the exception of the groups in Group A, they go with their elementary school or their high school.
So if, say we're at, a school with pre-K through 6, the phys ed, art and music teachers will receive the vaccine with the pre-K teachers, correct?
They would receive it in Group B. So pre-K through 3 goes first, and then they would go in Group B. So that said, we anticipate that we will have Group A. There would be slots available in Group A for people who are currently in Group B. So, but right now, the K through 3, so the K through 3 people and any that they have those children all day long, pre-K through 3 would go first, and then the specialized classroom, as well as our building engineers and custodians.
So we would give priority to the special PAM teachers over the 4 through 6 teachers in Group A if there's room.
So Mr. McDowell, bless him, has all of that behind the scenes, so I don't want to answer for him, but I know that right now the way that they're divided is that Group A is the list that I delineated, and then we're hoping that we'll have slots available for others.
Okay, very good. So that's a question that needs to be referred to human resources, correct?
So if at all possible, if some of these questions, we can take them offline, only because they require a level of detail that we may not want to share with everyone right this moment. And so we'd be happy to take those offline, if that's okay with you, Chair Bates.
No, that's fine. I think that we've focused on the big groups because those questions certainly are out there, and knowing that there are plans for these groups, and that it's something that'll be discussed with HR, I think is sufficient.
Thank you. We also recognize that every pre-K through 3rd grade teacher may not want to have the vaccine, and so we'll have room for other people to be able to get it.
Correct. Okay. Well, it certainly sounds like we've been very prepared for this, and we're very grateful that we have this opportunity for our staff, and in ahead of schedule as well. So thank you, Superintendent Mitchell and her leadership staff, for all the hard work and planning and preparation for this unexpected gift, really. So
Right.
All right, so we can move on. I see Dr. Amin is with us, and what I had hoped we could hear from Dr. Amin had discussed a very good presentation at our meeting a week ago Saturday, that there will be more information today on the reports of the COVID positives, which I understand are going in the direction we want them to. And also, if we have questions or to discuss more in depth the studies that were discussed by Dr. Amin and Dr. Khan a week ago Saturday. So thank you very much, Dr. Amin, for taking your time to the board about these very, very important issues. I know that there are people that have, but it sounds like we're all heading in the right direction here.
Thank you for having myself and Dr. Khan this afternoon. I think he will probably get started on our presentation when it is up.
Great, thank you again for having me. And I'm going to share one slide, the next one, please. And again, we just always like to reorient to the sequence of measures that reflect the current science of thinking about how to inform school planning. So these are offered as a tool to assist as you consider choices about hybrid and remote populations. and really assist in real-time decision making. And so again, as compared to the summer, where community measures were foremost, really focused over the fall and winter to a primary focus on school measures of COVID activity where possible, right? So the number of school cases and quarantines among staff and students, with a laser-like focus on evidence for in-school transmission. Related to that, and really where there were challenges in the fall, you could go back one, thank you, was around the adequacy of staffing levels, right? So as COVID at home and caretaking brings down the staff as a related measure for safe and effective operations. Probably the most important thing past and even more important going forward is consistent adherence to protective bundle measures. Like very high reliability is critical around mask and hygiene, ventilation, and so on. So those are the primary measures for opening, and then the community measures, the rate of new COVID cases in the community and the direction of that trend, and then indicators of how the community health system or public health system is performing. And they're a critical measure that you've probably heard repeatedly now is the percent of tests that are positive, which is as much an indicator of can testing keep up with the disease as the actual percent that are positive. Much attention in that last note to the Ohio Public Health Advisory System. Certainly has a lot of valuable metrics in it, but as best we can tell, it was never intended to be the final decision maker on opening and closing. I think what we have found across the fall is that certain elements of it, it's a very complex measure with 7 total elements, outpatient visits, ED, hospital admissions, and ICU occupancy. That data often lags what's happening. And that's why the Hamilton County Public Health, the Cincinnati Health Department, Cincinnati Children's, and the Health Collaborative have endorsed this approach of school measures as primary, community measures as secondary, and keeping an eye on the Ohio Public Health Advisory System. This is very consistent with many other national guidelines, this approach of primary focus at the school. Again, all of this is just one piece of information for the very complex decision making for whether to be on-site, hybrid, or remote. This is the COVID epi to inform it, but it's not the only factor that has to get taken into account in whether you'll be on-site. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Amin to bring you up to date on the most recent clinical data.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. Yep. So this is just the confirmed cases for students and staff as we have been monitoring over the period of the last several months. As of to date, we still do not have that in-school transmission since our kids are remote, and the only cases where we've seen is through the extracurricular activity interactions. Next slide, please. And looking at our trends for the total counts each day, since it's been about almost 2 weeks where we're continuing to see a lower number each day, we are still averaging at about 170 cases for the last 21 days, but we're happy to see that the numbers are continuing to decline. Next slide. And looking at the 21-day average, we have 8 out of the 21 days where we've seen, a decrease in the 7-day moving average. But again, as I've mentioned before, I wouldn't say this is, we're still, high numbers, and so it's not a reflection of a complete downward shift. And looking at our cases per 100,000, we are at 48 cases per 100,000 for the city of Cincinnati. Next slide. And this is the same curve, but the previous figure was showing you the total counts, and this is looking at the new cases per 100,000, so that rate for the city of Cincinnati. And the gray bar is showing your 7-day moving average for the rate. And so to compare it to the county overall, I think the county as of today or yesterday was at 54 per 100,000. So, very close in terms of that rate. Next slide, please. And our percent positive, the left side, you'll see Hamilton County outside of the city. So as of last week, it was 16.3. And for the city of Cincinnati, it remains at 12.4. I believe it's been 12.4 for the last several weeks. So not improving, but not increasing. Next slide, please. And our test to results, the average and median, or the median continues to be at 2 days. So good productivity on the labs. Next slide. And then looking at our community trends for Hamilton County school districts, as we mentioned, I think last week, that the numbers continue to be a bit lower than we did see in November and December for our county overall. I believe that's all.
Do committee members have questions for Dr. Amin or Dr. Khan? Mr. Messer.
Yeah, I got questions after one of our last meetings, and I wasn't quite able to answer that. But I know we continue to track rates after we went remote. And so the question was, do we have kind of an average, like, were we tracking it by month in remote that we could compare to like the number when we were in person? And I saw, I had the one slide, but I didn't remember if we talked about that. So A, how is it tracked? How do we get the data if we're not in school? So how's that reported? And then do we have, any sort of data on when we were remote compared to when we were in person as far as the number of infection rates?
Yeah, so I believe Sarah Trimble Oliver had reported on that maybe a few meetings ago. But the way that we're getting the information is either through the collaboration between Cincinnati Children's, through the testing that they're doing, and through testing that's happening just at Children's, or if the parents are reporting it. So I think there's a bit of underreporting, but those are the two routes. And I'm not sure if she's on the call, if she wanted to talk a little bit more about that.
Or what I would add is we certainly do have those counts tracked. A couple of things that make it complicated to compare, though, is what Dr. Amin just mentioned is, a possible underreporting since we don't have in-person learning. Are we really getting the cases reported to us the same way we would if we were in person? And the second is, if you remember when we were in blended learning, we were doing required staff testing, which, impacts your counts as well, catching asymptomatic cases, which we discontinued that when we were in distance learning. So a couple of things that would make the comparison a little bit tricky.
So to that point, I'd like to add that, and this is like hot off the press, I forgot to mention this to you all. So much is happening so quickly, but I did receive from the health commissioner today that the county has received a grant, and so they actually will be able to do rapid testing in our schools for the adults.
Oh, wow.
Yay.
So testing for our students. And then the health department will be able to do rapid testing in our sites for our adults and the vaccine. So we have a lot of things moving in the right direction for school to open.
Yes, Ms. Bowers.
Yes, that's wonderful, Superintendent Mitchell. And just to clarify, the rapid testing, is it like that 15-minute window test? When you say rapid?
Time, but it's pretty quick.
Okay, all right, very good, very good. I just want some clarity from either Dr. Khan probably. Dr. Khan, community has, identified for us, and we've talked about this in December, how we have, we're agile, and when we know more, we do better. When we learn better, we kind of change. And with some of the criteria you just identified for school measures being the primary indicator versus the actual Ohio Public Health Advisory System. There are plenty of questions about that in the community as to how we've moved, and we realize as we progress that this indicator for the school measure is probably better than just the community, like you reiterate. Can you speak more about that?
Sure.
And I think the community knows it as the color code. Code system.
And again, those are all best efforts when they got started. And, we've tried to emphasize we got to follow the science because we've learned so much over the last 9 months. And before I do, though, I just want to give a shout out to the rapid antigen testing. When I read which way this country is going, that is the way it's going. There are very few school districts in the country that are actively applying it. So kudos, and obviously lots to learn how to do it well. But when I hear, there are a few places in the country that are doing it now, and they're held up as shining examples. In terms of what's the difference between the community measure and the school measure, I often try to think, like, what's the metaphor? There is no firewall between the community and the school. Like, we know that. That being said, the community measures are a proxy or a predicted risk for what would be happening in the school. What's changed is now we have a system to measure within the school. So why over rely on the outside measure when you can actually take the temperature inside the school and see what's happening? So it could be, you're at 20 per 100,000 or 60 per 100,000. What you really want to know is, are we safe or not when we're inside the walls of the school? Will I get COVID? Is there going to be inside the schoolroom transmission or not? And so that's why, we really put an emphasis on measuring what's happening in the school. And the community stuff is a proxy for, it's a predictor of, but it's not the same thing as measuring the added risk inside the classroom. And as the evidence emerged, remember where I had that Swiss cheese analogy I showed at one or two of the meetings, in which once you add layers, you add the masking, you add the hygiene, you add the ventilation, you add the hand washing, and so on, you add vaccines, you add testing, you're creating space between what's happening in the community and what's happening inside. It's like adding layers to your coat to keep you safer and warmer inside the school. So primary measure in the school, it is still important what's happening in the community. The more the community is rising, the more the pressure is. It's like you're dropping a sub down into the water. The more intense the pressure is that it's going to get into the school, and that's why I say if you're at 30, 40, 50, 60. Wearing the mask, the hand washing, all that just becomes even more important to be 100% reliable. Not even 90%. It's not okay to wear your mask right 90% of the time. You got to be wearing it 100% of the time correctly. Otherwise, that community measure becomes influences the school measures even more. Is that helpful?
Thank you. Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Messer.
Sorry, no, I just was casting my hands. I didn't have another question. Thank you.
Didn't? Okay. I have a question, and actually, Dr. Khan went over this on Saturday, but this continues to be a question in the community, and that is how the spacing really affects transmission, or what we can do to reduce transmission based on spacing between 3 feet and 6 feet.
And I'll start the answer, and Dr. Mean or others, please chime in. What I tried to emphasize is what the accumulated literature seems to show, right? Spacing is important, and it's a continuum, right? It's not a fine line where you're at risk here and you're completely safe there. So what I was emphasizing is the literature seems to show 6 feet or more is safer than 3 to 6 feet. 3 to 6 feet is safer than less than 3 feet. So it's a continuum, and there are papers out there that will show that curve. I always say safer or less safe. There's no such thing as safe. Like we're in a pandemic. It's COVID. And so I do think we have to be really careful about the language. It's not that it's safe at 6 feet or safe at 3 to 6 feet. It's all a continuum of risk that you're balancing against these other important variables you all have to bring in, like that guide whether you're on site or not. So continuum, just say one more time, 6 feet or more safer than 3 to 6 feet. 3 to 6 feet is safer than less than 3 feet. And that's my read of literature. Dr. Amin, your sense? Nope, you're on mute. Still on mute. You're still on mute, Dr. Amin.
Oh,
there you go.
Can you hear me? Okay. I would completely agree that we know that the 6 feet is the safer route, and that's what we would continue to recommend.
I'll just add, because people, the background context is also changing, right? So, and certain factors may influence. So the ages of the child. So in general, folks have thought it's safer to start with younger children, bringing them back. In relation to the distance, I think many of us are keeping an eye on the variant. We know there are greater contagion rates, and even in the last couple of days, there's some question, in fact, can it lead to more serious illness? And so this idea of what's safer has to also take into account what else is happening in the background. As of now, when I ask around, nobody in the region has identified that the variant is in the region, but you can imagine, a different interpretation of spacing if, in fact, a more serious and more contagious variant was prevalent in the region. So I just want to, just trying to keep the whole picture in mind. So when we focus on spacing, we're leaving out masking and variants, and to get the dialogue, us all in the same place, I just want to put that spacing in the context of a couple other pieces.
Mr. Messer?
Yes, this is specific to the vaccine, and I think it's wonderful the administration is bringing Dr. Owen in to just answer questions to our staff, because lots of our staff rightfully have some hesitation, and I think it's important to have those conversations. Until the single dose that actually will be out by my company, fingers crossed, after the next couple of weeks, we have these 2-dose options. And what was sent to in my workplace was that I believe with the Pfizer, after the first dose was a 52% effectiveness rate, which is what they felt was appropriate for us to go back into the workplace. And so, I just want to validate that, that is data that you're looking at too, because I bet that becomes a question for people. And then, just thinking about that, I think the other question I've gotten even today is do you have to get it right on the day, 3 weeks later, or is there a window? Because people are nervous about the specificity of the timing for that second. So you could answer those 2 questions.
So I would love to have a vaccine expert get you precise data on that. I think I know the answers to those, but I would love to put Laura's team in touch with the vaccine experts, just so you can see specifically. My gut would be you have a few days. Not my gut. My read is you have a few days on either end, but I don't want to give a wrong estimate for you on those 2 pieces. So, Dr. Amin, if you have more precise answers to it.
From our understanding is that you cannot give it too early, but if for, let's say, the Moderna vaccine, you can give it that plus or minus 4 days, so 24 days after dose 1 or 32 days after dose 2, but you can go past that 32 days. So that's how we've been, modeling our vaccinations for second doses. But I agree, if we can get somebody who can validate our understanding.
And Dr. Amin, I think and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the health department, that they set up your next appointment so that it's pretty lockstep and on schedule so that you are able to get the 2 doses.
Yes.
Is that correct?
People will get reminders that their second dose is approaching, and then they'll get notification of how to schedule that second dose. And we try to send out those reminders in that window that's closer to when you're eligible, so that we don't get anybody who's registering before they're eligible. I did want to add one comment that I forgot to add beforehand, because there was question last time about what the difference is in terms of people who are living in multi-unit housing versus residential homes. And we took a quick look at that, very rough draft, but we found that only 18% of the positives came from multi-unit housing. So the majority were coming from single-unit housing. So kind of unrelated to the vaccines, but just to answer your previous question.
That's very interesting, isn't it? So committee members or administration, do you have further questions? Well, thank you very much for taking your time. This is very, very helpful to the board, to the community, and we really thank you for this partnership. It's amazing, and you know, with your partnership and leadership, we are really standing out. So again, much gratitude to you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right, so committee members, do we have anything else to come before the committee, or are there any questions or assignments that have come from all this information that we received today?
Ms. Bates, one comment just as we thank them, but I don't think you could ever say it too much, but isn't Dr. Amin also a CPS parent? Did I understand that correctly? I was thinking that somebody would give us advice, and when she was talking about our children, and I thought, I wonder, but I just was trying to see if anyone else had remembered that.
I don't know, but I will confirm.
Yeah. But it's, just the fact that they have, and I think this is something too that's gotten a little bit lost on the public. And as I've seen things, and lesson number one, if you're going to do what we're all doing, you should never read Facebook comments. But I did it one night, and they said, well, nobody's a health expert, so you shouldn't be making a decision, and there's been no medical experts giving an opinion. Well, I've sat through a whole bunch of presentations by medical experts from Children's who have gone above and beyond to serve us and our children on their evenings and weekends, and so I think it's good to just kind of remind the public that they have been with us along the way, and that was really set up very early on to give us an advisory board, because we're not doctors and we're not epidemiologists, et cetera. So thank you, Superintendent, for coordinating, having them available to us.
Yes, Ms. Bowers.
Yes, assignments. I think you asked about assignments. Superintendent, you're probably going to do this anyway, as we can get an update as to the number of people that have been tested between Thursday and Saturday. And that maybe, I don't know if that can be
vaccinated. You mean?
What did I say?
Tested.
Yes. I'm sorry, vaccinated. Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. So that, just to get an idea of how many of our staff have actually based it, that'll give us some insight on how many were at the information session possibly and got those questions answered, and hopefully we'll go ahead and get vaccinated. So I don't know if we should wait next month, or maybe, I don't know when that information can be given at the board meeting, maybe on the 8th. That would be ideal. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And then maybe, and I know this hasn't officially been declared, that obviously there's not a mandate that staff has to be vaccinated. But what happens if we have someone who's uncomfortable working and has refused the vaccination? What will we do for any of those gaps, and how will we manage that? So that can be for a future discussion, because I'm sure there will be some. We heard at least a percentage from that survey. So,
right.
Okay. Any other assignments or brought before the committee? Well, you have your homework looking at the work plan to make sure that everything we need to cover is covered, and then we'll ask for acceptance by the full board, and that'll be our go-to. And also think about having legislative brought over to our side, especially now when so much is concerning health and safety in the legislature. I think that probably would be a good move too. So yes, Ms. Bowers.
Yeah, Chairman Bates, Chairperson Bates, would that mean that that it will be leaving Finance Committee and coming to us, or in addition to?
No, it will be leaving finance and coming to us.
Okay. Okay. And so your request from the board is that it be put into our work plan up under us?
We would have to amend our bylaws because right now
Uh-huh.
committees, a legislative is with hands. So
Exactly.
we would have to have the board make that change.
And the request is the request to amend the bylaws to make that change. Is that your request? Okay.
Right. Then I'll take it to the full board, but I certainly wanted you to have some thought into that as well. So, and finance is a very long meeting. This would be very helpful, help divide the work a little bit better. And I do think it's appropriate in this day and time. And it's actually, I find it really, really interesting. I hope you do too. So.
Great.
All right. Anything else?
Well, who knew health and safety would be so fun? And, great news at our first meeting. So thank you, Superintendent.
Yes. Thank you so much. This is
Thank you for all your work, Laura. You've been phenomenal in your team. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not me, but thank you. And the health department. I mean, they moved heaven and earth to get these pods up and running for us. So a big thank you to the health department. Thank you.
Fabulous partners. We do have fabulous partners.
Okay. Great work, committee. And with no further business, I call this meeting adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Bye-bye.